What is up, guys? I'm Kyle at Fortune, and today I wanted to talk about what I use to air up my tires, CO2 tank. So by far the best thing you can do for your truck when you're off-roading, not only for comfort, but also to get some more traction, is to air down your tires. I always invite everybody to air their tires down with me, and of course a lot of people are like, nah, I don't want to air mine down because I have no way to air them back up. And that's a legitimate concern. If you're going down to even like 10 psi or lower, you don't want to be driving on the street like that because it's going to heat up your tires so much. The steering's going to be stressed out, speed's probably going to be reduced, all of that stuff. So people say I'll just fill up at the next gas station, but sometimes the next gas station is pretty far away. I was in the same boat as a lot of you guys. I didn't want to spend a ton of money to get my tires aired back up. There are a few different ways to do it. You have engine-driven pumps. You've got air compressors that run off your battery. Here's a list of all the stuff that I'm using currently to air my tires down, and then all the gear I put together to air them back up. I'll put a link to everything I can down there. A lot of this stuff is really easy to find on Amazon, and all of it you can have it shipped straight to your door. A while back I did a review on this. This is the Grip Performance Tire Deflator Kit. I've used this on literally every trail run I've done to air down, and it works really great. It takes about the same amount of time as a lot of the other ones, and you know, I might do a video on that comparing it someday, but this is the easy part, airing them down. It's getting the air back in that can prove tricky. So I would love to go get a power tank set up from Power Tank that just looks like an awesome product, and in my opinion I think it's the best thing you can get as far as air tanks go, but with that comes a price. The cost is quite a bit above my budget, so building my own air tank is much cheaper, and really it's a little bit easier, and I'll get to that in a minute. The first thing you're gonna have to do is purchase a tank. I bought mine off of Amazon, and they have all sizes out there, 5, 10, 15, 20. I decided to go with 20 because I'm a bit of a maniac and the Suburban is huge. So I had room to store that, but the 20-pound tank is very heavy. They also don't make a lot of aftermarket support for it. So if you're looking for brackets and other things to mount it to a roll bar, you might have some problems with that. So I would recommend a 15-pound tank at the biggest, unless you have a setup like me where you have a ton of room. Once you've got your tank, you have a few options now. If you really like your tank, and when you get yours, it's gonna be brand new, right? And it's not gonna have really anything on it. So what you can do is slap some cool stickers on there and personalize it. And then the option you would wanna go with is go to a place that fills CO2 tanks. Now in my experience where I live, there just aren't a lot of people that are willing to fill them up, or they only do them on certain days, or you have to drop it off and come pick it up another day. So the option I went with is a much easier one, I think. You just take everything off your tank and you go swap it out for a full one. What I did is I just found a welding supply store, and they have all of the tanks already there. When I go there, they are super professional. They see the size of my tank and they say 20-pounder, you can just set it right here. Next thing I know, they're bringing out another one, and I just go up to the cash register and pay. I've noticed a lot of places aren't really that used to doing it for just regular guys like you and me. They're used to working with businesses and much bigger shipments and things like that. I think that is one of the reasons why it can get a little bit expensive. A few places quoted me at around $40 or $50 to fill up my 20-pound tank. This welding supply store does it for I think about $25, and then of course there's some other fees in there too, so it ends up being around 30, 32 bucks, something like that. But out the door, it's a much better deal than the other places. Once you have the tank, you have the most important part, but to connect it to your hoses and get that air into your tires or tools, you're gonna need a little bit more. The first thing you're gonna need is a regulator. Now this is a fixed pressure regulator that I also got off of Amazon. Here's the model number right here. It's 227C150. That 150 on here is saying that this fixed pressure is 150 psi. So that's one thing that a DIY setup doesn't have that a power tank would. You're not able to change the psi that you're putting out of here unless you somehow get an adjustable regulator, or maybe buy a regulator set up off Power Tank to put on your DIY one. The tank has an O-ring on the front So you don't need to put any Teflon tape or anything like that on there. And then this simply just screws on. Once you get to that point, you'll see you do have one fitting here. And this is where the option to personalize it really comes into play. So you can see on my setup here, I've got mine cocked at a little bit of an angle, and that allows me to get the hose on here, and I don't have this sticking any other way that's gonna allow it to get damaged when it's rolling around or if I drop it on the ground or something like that. So you just need a little connector here to bridge your regulator to your hose attachment. Another way I've seen this done is people go straight down with the regulator, and then they have one of these that has an angle in it and it puts it down and out about 45 or 30 degrees, and that can do the same thing as I've done here. You'll notice another thing that comes on these tanks is this handguard up here that rotates. This handle is always included some type of handle like this. They're not always the same when I swap them out, so it's something you're going to want to look into if this is part of your mounting solution. The next thing I got for my DIY air tank is this boot for the bottom. It's just a really thick plastic boot that slides on the bottom of this tank here, and it helps the bottom from just getting really dinged up. And also you'll see it has these flat edges on the side to where if your tank falls over and it's on an angle, it'll hopefully stop it from rolling. Once you get everything you need to set up your air tank, the next thing you're going to want to do is get a hose. This is the hose I'm using. It's a very simple setup, and it's just long enough to where I can hook it up to the tank and I can air up all of the tires without moving the tank around. Now there's a couple different kinds of these. There's the clear plastic kind that coil up and they save a lot of space, but I prefer to use this kind. It's more of the rubber, thicker coated ones, and the reason why I go with this is because it's tougher. Banging around in the back of your truck like this one, I coil it up and kind of just toss it in there. The hose is much tougher, and also these are usually a little bit stronger on the inside. Something important you're going to need to look at when you get your air tank set up is the PSI that these hoses are good for. Kind of hard to see on this one, but it says right here that it's pressurized up to 300 PSI, which our regulator only goes to 150, so this should be more than enough to handle that. To air my tires back up, I'm using one of these. I've bought a lot of stuff from Rhino. They make some really good products, and like I mentioned earlier, mine had broken because my regulator failed and it was putting out way too much PSI for this thing to even handle. I got a hold of Rhino, let them know what happened. They sent me a new one, and this is actually an improved one, so it's even better than the last, and this thing's been working great for me. All right. Plug our hose in, get this hose stretched out a little bit, because when it gets pressure in it and it gets cold, it's going to get stiff, so it might be harder to stretch after that. Alright, put our gauge in, turn the air on. So we're at 15 PSI right now, you can tell because this tire's flattened out pretty good. So we're putting out 147, 148 PSI. And remember, this regulator is limited to 150 PSI, so that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. And we are gonna take these up to, I think we're going to try 35 PSI for the ride home, and we'll see how that is. There it is, 35. All right, so when you're all done, you can see this is all frozen over now. Looks like I have a little bit of a leak down here, but just turn the air off. All right, and then it may take a second. If your hose is cold enough, you might need to let it kind of thaw out a little bit before you can coil it back up, but I'm just gonna disconnect mine, pack it in the truck, hit the road. So that's pretty much it, guys. The setup is fairly simple, and like I said, pretty much anybody can do this themselves at home. It's not hard to do, and if you're running little tiny 31s on your Samurai like me, or even some bigger 37s on a Suburban, I got about 10 fill-ups out of my 20-pound tank. And if you need to figure out how many fill-ups you can get out of a tank, there's plenty of places to look. You can look at Power Tank. They have a graph that'll show how many fill-ups you can expect to get out of a tank based on how much PSI you're going up every time. So there's a lot of factors in how much air you can get out of your tank. But with the 20-pound tank filling up 15 PSI each tire, they say you could get about 7 fill-ups out of it. So I think that's pretty good. Thanks for watching my video, guys. I hope you liked it, and I hope maybe now you're a little bit more comfortable with this air system and you do know that you can build it yourself. When I first saw it, I thought, man, you know, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't have any experience with this. I don't want to get myself hurt or damage any of my equipment, and really, it's easy. It's super easy and much cheaper than the competitors. So if you want to check out any of these parts, don't forget to look below. Make sure you subscribe so you can see the rest of the gear I'm using and check out the trucks as they hit the trail. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.